Hi guys, it's been a while. I know I dropped the ball on these videos, but don't you worry. I'll make them when I think the time is right, and that time is now. And hey, I've got a second review video in the work for this game, so I'll get that out to you guys and gals soon. And as always, thank you all for all the loving support I've had in the comments. It really makes my day every time I look at them, aside from the occasional hater. So, I'm sure you've already seen the title, and I really don't want to say this, but if you think healing is not your thing in this game, then I would advise you to look no further, as I'm just gonna go over the basics of being a decent healer in ESO. So, let's get into how to be a healer. So what is a healer in ESO? Well, it's actually pretty straightforward on surface level. Healing in ESO can be easily defined as a character that uses healing abilities to increase the survivability of his or her teammates and themselves. But remember, this is only a basic definition of a healer in ESO. There are surprisingly a lot of different types of healers throughout the community. For example, I am a warden healer that focuses on magicka as my primary resource of choice, which is 37 to 38,000 at maximum with food or drink active. I'll delve deeper on magicka later, but that's what I do. And to be more specific, I use abilities that also buff my allies while keeping their magicka, health, and stamina from depleting. So I guess in ESO, healing brings in a lot of different roles from other MMOs under one category. For example, DC Universe Online has 4 roles you can tinker with. A DPS, which is damage, a tank, which takes all the damage, a healer, which heals for health, and controller. Now I'm not very familiar with a controller in that game, but it seems that they control the battlefield and restore your energy for your abilities. In ESO, healers restore all of your unique resources and buff the team. So there's my botched definition of a healer in ESO. That being said, some people like to mix abilities together in order to achieve their healer build. This usually prompts someone to not like you for some reason. They call that a fake healer, or whatever role you're doing that on is. And I assume it's because if you're playing through difficult content, you pretty much have to do your job or perform your role, and if you don't do well, I'll tell you what, don't worry about that. I'm going to give you my build today as a reward for watching my video. And as a short disclaimer, the build I'm going to share is a work in progress, and if it doesn't work for you, then you probably just don't have the same playstyle as me. Everyone plays ESO in their own way, and while there can be very helpful information online, it's ultimately up to you to build around how you play. The internet is very resourceful, but I urge you to explore the possibilities. There's really not a wrong way to play this game. It's actually a very simple MMO. So, like I mentioned earlier, I am a Breton Warden healer that uses magicka as my primary resource of choice. And if you're wondering why I focus on magicka, let me explain. In ESO, you have 3 resources: health, magicka, and stamina. Health obviously keeps you alive and well. Magicka is used for a wide variety of magic abilities, and stamina is used in sprinting, blocking damage from an enemy, rolling, and for melee weapon abilities. Now, there are some exceptions in this list, but how I see it is that magicka is only ever used when using a magic ability. Yes, some abilities that start as a magic one can end up as a stamina ability through an upgrade called a morph. Think of it as an invisible skill tree with 2 branches off of the ability in the tree. But long story short, I use magicka because there are more magic healing abilities than stamina ones. I like having a variety of choices, what can I say? That being said, stamina isn't a bad choice for healing, but it's only useful in very specific situations. For now, let's just put all 64 attribute points into magicka. And as a Breton or High Elf Warden, this should give you an insane jump in magicka reserves, which is definitely needed because in ESO, the strength of your heals is determined by how much of your primary resource you have. And that's yet another reason why I don't use stamina, because I can never seem to get it over what's required for decent healing, and I'm always running around and blocking. So when your team is in a crunch for health, you can depend on stamina to let you and them down. But seriously, stamina isn't a bad choice, but it's very hard to maintain. With that said, let's talk about the magic healing skills you'll be using in my build. First, let's go over the magic abilities I use for this class. And don't worry, feel free to rewind or pause the video to analyze closely on how I fit these abilities together. So the first ability in our first hotbar is called Lotus Blossom, which is one of the morphs for Lotus Flower. This ability adds an additional heal to your light and heavy attacks. This does not replace your damage for a heal or decrease your damage done in any way. It also gives you, as the healer, 2 buffs: Major Prophecy and Major Savagery, increasing your critical which also increases the amount of healing you dish out to your teammates with your spells and weapons. At first glance, you might see it as a move only meant for a hybrid DPS and healer build, since it adds heals to your attacks, but I can argue that when you use a restoration staff as a healer, it just adds more healing overall, which is what I was going for. What's the point if you can't keep your teammates' health up, you know? The second ability I use is called Blue Betty, which is a morph of the original Betty Netch. This one is an easy choice for me since I focus on the Magicka resource. This ability spawns a small Netch at your side, restoring your Magicka over time. As you might have guessed, the other morph restores your stamina, which is what we don't want. It also applies the Major Brutality and Major Sorcery buffs to your character, increasing your base weapon and spell damage by 20%, which is a lot, and what this game fails to mention is that it also increases your base healing through your magic abilities and weapons. Oh, and to put a little cherry on top, it removes one negative effect from you every 5 seconds. That's good, because you don't want to be wasting extra heals on yourself if you have an enemy's damage on you over time. With this, you won't have to worry about that. The third ability is your first ally buffing ability, Expansive Frost Cloak, a morphed version of Frost Cloak. This one gives you and your allies within 36 meters of you Major Resolve, which increases your physical and spell resistance by a significant amount. Now you could use Ice Fortress as well, the other morph. This one does the same thing, but has a very small radius of effect compared to 36 meters. You also get a minor protection buff, which increases your damage mitigation by 5% from all enemies. Now that's a deal. I actually used this ability for a while, but recently realized that I was trying to force my team to stick together, which will rarely be the case. And I had to step in the middle of the group where there are usually enemies attacking, risking my own life, which in my opinion risks the whole team's life. So I changed it to Expansive because of the insane radius it has of 36 meters. And this only decreased the duration of its activation by 10 seconds. So I think it was definitely worth it for me, since I like to hang in the back and have all players in my view. The fourth ability in this bar I'll be listing is Enchanted Growth, the morph of Fungal Growth. Enchanted Growth utilizes the power of psychedelic mushrooms to burst heal your allies in a cone formation. The length of the cone is 20 meters, which is decently long, and this ability gives your allies yet another set of buffs called Minor Intellect and Minor Endurance. These restore everyone's magicka and stamina quicker by adding a whopping 15% to your total magicka and stamina recovery stats. Very good for helping your allies restore their resource of choice so they can devastate their enemies. The final basic ability we have for the first hotbar shall be Budding Seeds, and you guessed it, it's a morph of the Healing Seed ability. This one spawns a 28-meter circle that heals you and your allies within that circle. Oh, and the circle grows your very own garden. Better not grow anything illegal. Your teammates can also activate a prompt on the screen called a Synergy in order to harvest the flowers, which gives them healing over time. On top of that, when the ability's duration ends, it explodes with a massive burst heal to anyone in the circle. You can also end this one early by activating it again. It's truly the most reliable healing ability a Warden can have. And last but definitely not least on the first hotbar, my ultimate ability. I don't know about you, but I take joy in keeping people alive and healthy, so I picked Reviving Barrier as a morph from the classic Barrier move. This ability is truly overpowered. It gives everyone within a 12-meter radius a damage shield that absorbs a ton of damage within 30 seconds while healing everyone that has one of them for 15 seconds. In my case, it grants a 35,797 damage shield and heals for 20,220 health over time.
Now that's a lot of damage!
Now let's move on to my second hotbar, the backup bar. Keep in mind that I'm using restoration staves for both bars when moving forward in this video. That is crucial when understanding my build. The first ability in this bar of many shall be Cleanse, a morph of the Purge ability within the support skill line. Now if you don't have any of these PvP abilities, I highly suggest hating yourself until you get them. It's honestly worth it because ZeniMax and Bethesda really just want to give an excuse on why you should play PvP. So, hit up those battlegrounds. If you don't prefer to do that, I can refer you to the Siphon Spirit ability. This one is a morph of Force Siphon in the Restoration Staff skill line. While Cleanse heals and removes negative effects off of your allies such as bleed or poison, Siphon Spirit will apply the minor lifesteal and minor magicka steal debuffs to your enemies so your allies can sleep well at night knowing they can wake up with a more sufficient healer by their side. These debuffs or buffs, whichever you prefer to call them, will give your allies magicka and health back when they damage the enemies cursed with this ability, but cleanse is what I use as of now. The second ability award goes to Radiating Regeneration, a morph of regeneration, and I'm sure you've seen random healers spam this out in the open. I gotta admit, it looks like a light show and it's so amazing when everyone spams it. This ability will heal you or up to 3 other allies within 28 meters of you for X amount of health, all in a duration of 10 seconds. The third ability is another ability you might have to grind for. In its place, you could use another restoration staff ability, such as Ward Ally or other green balance tree abilities. But the ability I use is called Energy Orb, a morph of Necrotic Orb. This one is found in the Undaunted Guild skill line, which requires you to be at least level 45 to access it. Don't worry though, you'll be there before you know it. I believe in you all. The fourth ability in my backup bar is called Combat Prayer, the morph of Blessing of Protection. This morph gives you and your allies health in a line with a huge burst, and buffs everyone's damage and resistance by handing out Minor Berserk and Minor Resolve. And remember, major and minor buffs do stack. So technically, you're also applying Major Resolve from the previous skill, Expansive Frostcloak, further improving the survivability for you and the entire team, assuming you got good aim with Combat Prayer. Beware though, Combat Prayer only lasts for 10 seconds, while Expansive Frostcloak lasts for 20. So 2 Combat Prayers back to back with the Cloak is currently the go-to for me. If it's too much, then I'm sorry, but I love using my abilities. The fifth ability will consist of the Healing Springs morph of the Grand Healing ability. This one heals everyone within a 28-meter circle whilst giving you a boost in magic or recovery of 15 for each player in there. This can stack up to 20 times, so imagine if you had 20 people in there. That would increase your current magic or recovery to a staggering amount of 300 plus whatever you already have. That's a lot of magic or recovery. Some people would prefer to use Illustrious Healing, the other morph of this ability, which does heal for more health, but it's really not needed with all of the other abilities that stack on each other. I'd rather keep my magicka up for a long period than having to stop every now and then to recover it. That's just me though. The last ultimate ability on this bar is by far the best buff to damage ability you'll ever witness, and you get to blow the Horn of War. I use Aggressive Horn, a morph of Warhorn. This ultimate increases everyone's magicka and stamina max capacities by 10%. This is a huge number. Too bad it only lasts for 30 seconds, which is also a huge number. Your allies affected by this also gain a damage buff called Major Force. This buff increases your critical damage by 20% for 10 seconds. While it's not the whole duration of the ultimate, you will definitely see a difference in your boss's health depletion, especially if you catch everyone within a 20-meter radius on your team. That way, everyone gets the buff. And there you have it. Those are the magic skills I use to heal and buff my allies. But please, feel free to mess around with all the morphs I didn't mention in this video. This game, look guys, this game is so customizable you have no idea. So just go out there and test whatever you want. I'm sure you'll find a build that helps you the most, if this one doesn't. Let me know in the comments how you like it so far. I'm always down to hear from others. That's how we all get better at this game. Teamwork makes the dream work, baby. Now let's move on to another topic I want to quickly go over. Passive abilities. These passives are skills that are always active on your character as long as you purchase them with the necessary skill points. Think of them as a background buff that you always have on your character. So, here's a list of passive abilities I use for my healer. And just as a long story short, you're going to want all passive abilities within these skill lines. First is the Green Balance skill line, which focuses on upgrading your healing abilities in all sorts of ways. To be specific, these passives include an increase in your healing capability by adding Major Mending and Minor Toughness to your healing abilities. Next is the Restoration Staff skill line, which upgrades all of your staff's healing abilities and increases your overall healing with them. These passives also restore extra magicka to you through attacking or blocking with this weapon. The Light Armor skill line, which upgrades your skills while wearing multiple pieces of this type of armor. This also increases your healing and resistances to incoming spells. The Undaunted skill line, which will increase specific things like how effective your armor is or how strong your synergies are for the team. Very important for a healer. This next one is very important. The Racial skill line, which for me as a Breton focuses on increasing my magicka reserves and recovery. You can also use High Elf, which increases damage instead of recovery. Now I believe high elves heal for more because of this, but I might be wrong. But remember that spell damage is tied to your heals directly, making them stronger with better spell damage. Lastly is the support skill line. This skill line only has one passive that you'll need, in which it will increase your recovery of magicka by 10%. Very good for keeping your magicka up for constant healing. With that said, there are other skill lines that I didn't mention, such as the medium and heavy armor passives. Same goes for the Winter's Embrace and Animal Companion passives. I won't be going over every passive ability in this video simply because there are so many, so if you want a more in-depth analysis on why you should use all those passives, let me know in the comment section down below. Just remember, it's a good rule of thumb in this game to obtain all of your passive abilities from every single tree that directly affects your playstyle. Sometimes there are crossovers that make doing what you do 10 times easier and efficient. Remember earlier when I mentioned quite a few buffs for you and your team? It can be a lot of information, so let's take a quick look at what we have so far. We are currently running the following buffs with skills and passives alone, and again, feel free to pause on this list if it's too fast. The list goes as follows: Major Resolve and Minor Resolve. These buffs increase your physical and spell resistance by quite a bit. The next one is Minor Berserk, which increases everyone's damage by 5%. It's pretty good. Minor Toughness is also applied to the team, which increases their health by 10%. Also very good for a healer. Major Courage and Major Force, which increases weapon and spell damage and critical by 20%. Also a huge number. Next up is Minor Endurance and Minor Intellect. This gives you and your team 15% magicka and stamina recovery. Now this one's an important one, Major Mending. This is for you, but technically it's for your team because it increases your healing done to them by 16%. That is a huge number, and you'll always be doing that as a warden healer, as long as you heavy attack properly and frequently. Now the next two are if you don't have Purge or Cleanse and you want to use Siphoning Spirit instead, which Siphoning Spirit gives you Minor Lifesteal and Minor Magicka Steal on hit for the whole team. And what I mean by that is, as soon as you curse an enemy and the team hits that enemy, they get more health and more magicka back at a certain rate. The next four are the most important in your class: Major Prophecy, Savagery, Brutality, and Sorcery. The first two, Major Prophecy and Savagery, increase your weapon and spell critical, which also increases your healing critical. Major Brutality and Sorcery increase your weapon and spell damage by 20%, which also increases your healing by 20%. I might be wrong about that, but that's what it says, 20%. So if you're using healing abilities, I would assume that it, increases it by 20% as well. Huge number. Take advantage of that. I will be linking a website that I can trust for the definitions of these buffs in the description below. So please, if you have the time, check it out. You won't regret it. After all, knowledge is power. Well, there you have it, folks. That is my Breton Warden Healer build. And if you're wondering what I use for my armor sets, well then maybe I'll just make a new video about that. It really just depends how well this video does. So if you haven't checked it out yet, click on my previous video, which is a newbie's review of ESO. In it, I explain what it's like playing as a new player in the year 2023. I hope you like this video, and if you want any more of them, be sure to subscribe for more content. And hey, we'll be playing NECROM when it comes out on June 20th, so don't forget, join our Discord and have some good times with me and my friends. Hey, and maybe you'll even join our guild, Mighty Misfits, on here. I don't know, I was just shooting my shot, I guess. Anyways, have a good one, and I hope to see you all in the vast world of Tamriel.